the House Oversight Committee yesterday, it was actually Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna posted a link, a URL on her X account. She said, here are some more Epstein files. I think it was 33,000 pages that was given to House Oversight by the Department of Justice were uploaded to a Google Drive, sheet by sheet, not a searchable PDF, but one page at a time, one page per file, was uploaded to Google Drive and was released for the public. Now, what's in those documents, that's what we're going to talk about right now, the biggest takeaways. But before we get to that, there was a press conference that was held this morning. This was held by Congressman Thomas Massie in the lead up, or kind of in the midst of his discharge petition that would bring to a vote on the floor of the House a piece of legislation that would force the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files, something President Trump is against, but Thomas Massie says is important. A lot of drama involved here. A press conference was held this morning by Thomas Massie. He brought with him victims of Jeffrey Epstein, women who claimed that they were sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. And a couple of these victims, a couple of these women made claims during this press conference that I want to address before we even get to the contents of the 33,000 pages of Epstein files that were released by the House Oversight Committee. To start with, there was a Epstein victim who said that the names of others who victimized women alongside of Jeffrey Epstein, the names are known. Essentially, there is a list because the names are known, but this list has been hidden from the public by lawmakers. Take a look.
But what I'm most excited...
He's not an Epstein victim. We'll bring up the correct video here in a second. This is the woman in the sunglasses who says that the names are known to the government and that it's lawmakers who have stood in the way of releasing these names to the public. Spence is going to bring up this video. If you want to just, I think the link is right there. You can click on the link on X too. We'll bring this up here in just a second. This press conference, by the way, was attended primarily by huge numbers of reporters and media. If you look at the photos of this press conference, just an enormous number of media figures were there covering this. More attendees from the media than the general public, but a lot of eyeballs were on this press conference. I was interested in it. I'm sure that you were interested in it as well, because of things that were said by Epstein victims, such as this woman. If we have this, we can play it. There you go.
And let me announce now, several of us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list of names. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now, together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors. No one else is involved. Stay tuned for more details on that. Because history is watching, and so are the women who will come after us. Thank you.
Now, this press conference was highly viewed. A lot of people in the United States, in the government, civilians, regular Americans like you and me watched this press conference. We wanted to hear what was said. We wanted to hear if there was new information that was released, and if so, what it was. But my question following this press conference is, if you have a list of the names of people who were associated with Epstein, who committed crimes similar to the crimes that Epstein committed, sexual crimes against underage girls, why aren't you releasing those names today? Why stand up at the podium after all this time and claim that you have this information and yet don't disclose this information? That doesn't make sense to me. Maybe there's a reason why that I haven't thought of. Maybe there's a process in place. Maybe there are legal implications of accusing someone if you don't have evidence. But why don't they stand up and say, this is the name of the person, I was coerced into having sex with him, that was sexual abuse. This is a crime. If that exists, release it publicly. We don't want more white binders. We don't want more promises of information. We want the information. This was also the case with the 33,000 pages of Epstein files that were released by House Oversight. The 33,000 pages were given to House Oversight by the Department of Justice, so by Pam Bondi's people. And what's in the 33,000 pages, well, 97% of it is old news. 97% of it is files that have been previously released. The 3% of files that are new are flight logs that are highly redacted. This is not a revelation. This too might as well have been put in a white binder. Now, the reason that House Oversight released these files is because of what Congressman Thomas Massie is doing. You can agree with him or you can disagree with him, but I know the President Trump, strongly disagrees with Thomas Massie, and he's even the president has told Republicans that if you go along with Thomas Massie, you are committing an act of disloyalty to the president. Putting that aside for a second, we'll talk about that in a moment. What Congressman Massie is doing, theoretically, is something that I've been calling for Congress to do for a long time, and that is get members of Congress on record about everything. Because if you think that members of Congress who are supposed to represent us are not in alignment with how based we are, what we want them to do, it's because they face no accountability for not doing what we want them to do. And one of the ways that they avoid that accountability is they never go on record. They never actually take the hard position. They never actually have to cast a vote on the things that would make their base, their constituents, their donors angry. And what Thomas Massie's doing is what actually should be done on almost every issue, and that is make these members of Congress go on record. So what's going to happen if this discharge petition is actually, if it actually succeeds, if it results in a piece of legislation brought to the floor of the House of Representatives, and that piece of legislation forces members of Congress to vote on whether the Epstein files should be released, this puts members of Congress in a very interesting position. They can either listen to their constituents, we obviously want the Epstein files to be released, or they can vote no, and it then looks like they are trying to hide the Epstein files. Now, again, that's sort of setting aside President Trump's interaction with Congress and telling Republican members of Congress don't vote for this. If I'm a Republican member of Congress, I vote for this. You don't vote no on this. You can like the president, you can support the president, you can respect the president. You know I do. But you don't vote against the release of the Epstein files. What you'll see happen if this is brought to the floor is you'll see Republicans vote in favor of this. And you'll see the Republicans who refuse to vote in favor of this, you'll see them face accountability from their voters. And this is exactly what's supposed to happen. So if you want, remove the content of this for a second and just look at the process. This process is how you and I make Congress be more based. It's how you make members of Congress walk in lockstep with us versus what they usually do, which is, not representing what we want at all. Now, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who sits on the House Oversight Committee, had a very interesting comment about Jeffrey Epstein and his possible reported alleged ties to Intel meaning intel agencies, ours, or maybe foreign intel. Luna commented on Epstein's possible ties to foreign intel, and I want to play that video now. Let's take a look at that.
But what I'm most excited.
Okay, we can just bring it up on X too. This is Anna Paulina Luna commenting on Epstein, not just Epstein's ties to Intel, but to foreign intel. Now, this would take it even a step further than what you and I have discussed at length, which would be former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta when he was talking to the Department of Justice, OPR, and he was asked, this is in 2020, he was asked, why the sweetheart deal? Why'd you give a non-prosecution agreement to Jeffrey Epstein back in 2007? And Acosta's reported reply was, I was told to back off because Epstein belonged to Intel. Now, the insinuation would maybe be U.S. intel, but there are, of course, theories, including Mike Benz's theory, which I find to be the most plausible theory about Jeffrey Epstein, that Jeffrey Epstein was not an employee of an intelligence agency, not a source, not a paid person, but an off-the-books, unpaid liaison between governments or private entities on behalf of our government or other governments when our government or other governments didn't want to look like they were associated with whatever deal was being brokered. That's the Mike Benz theory about Jeffrey Epstein that I find to be the most plausible explanation of Jeffrey Epstein. It kind of separates Jeffrey Epstein's pedophilia from his government intel or accusations of his government intel work, but it also explains why, once Jeffrey Epstein's crimes against underage girls were exposed, why these government officials would say, well, leave him alone because he's worked off the books for us. And of course, this is unacceptable. That's never going to be something that the American people accept when it comes to just how egregious the crimes were that he was committing against underage girls. But Congresswoman Luna suggests along this same line that Epstein was not just intel here in the United States, but was possibly associated with foreign intel. Take a listen.
Right now, the biggest thing that stands out to me is the victims themselves have stated that this is a lot bigger than I think anyone anticipated. We are obviously going to be requesting the SARS reports from Treasury, and also too following up on that. There's some very rich and powerful people that need to go to jail. I think everyone's been frustrated as to why that hasn't happened before. But it is very much so a possibility that Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence asset working for our adversaries. But also, too, I think the questions that we have is how much did our own government know about it? And so there's more to follow, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from the chairman momentarily. But I do applaud the victims from coming forward, because we heard from a woman who was as young as 14 years old when she was victimized multiple times by Jeffrey Epstein. So that's hard to hear.
Would you sign the discharge petition, the massive discharge petition?
I think that the files will probably be released prior. I don't know why Comer hasn't. I think that he should do it, so it wouldn't even have to come to a vote. But I mean, obviously, I've been a huge advocate, even when I was the only one in Congress calling for the release of this file. So I think I'd be happy to, yes. Thank you.
What do they call for the victims? They want those files released?
The victims want information to be out there, but they don't want their personal information, I think, for good reason to be out there. So I think from the get-go, even the Attorney General stated that there's victim information that you have to make sure that's private, being that some of the victims also, too, are as young as 14, that's child pornography. No, thank you, guys.
Okay, let her through.
Now, again, I would say, of all the theories about Jeffrey Epstein, the one that I find to be the most plausible, the one that I'm not ideologically tied to this, but the one that I find to be the most likely to make the most sense, would be the theory that Epstein was an off-the-books liaison, financial liaison, between or brokering deals between governments that didn't want to look like they were associated with this deal. The example would be Iran-Contra, right? There were off-the-books liaisons that brokered the deal between the U.S. government giving arms, which was against the law, to Iran at the time. And the U.S. government didn't want to look like they had their hands in it. And so they used off-the-books liaisons to kind of transact these deals. This is the most likely scenario, in my opinion, given the information that we have right now about what relationship Jeffrey Epstein had to intel. Now, what intel that is, I don't know. I don't know whether that's CIA. I don't know if that's FBI. I don't know if that's NSA. I don't know if it's any other of the alphabet soup agencies here in the United States, in our intelligence community. I don't know whether that's foreign intel. I don't know whether that's, the UK intel, the French intel, Saudi intel, Israeli intel. I don't know. I think it's plausible. That's the most likely scenario. And what's interesting is that there might have been a sort of Streisand effect that happened with the Jeffrey Epstein story. And what I mean by that is Jeffrey Epstein committed hideous, heinous crimes against children. And this is actually why we care about the Jeffrey Epstein story. We care about it because our visceral gut reaction is we're sickened by this. We don't want to live in a nation where men who commit these grisly crimes against children are let off the hook. And yet Jeffrey Epstein was let off the hook. And so our exploration of this has always been why. Why was Jeffrey Epstein let off the hook? Because he should be rotting in prison. And the answers that we've gotten have been, well, Alex Acosta said he was tied to intel. That was one theory. There's of course another very prevalent theory that Epstein was running honeypot operations on behalf of foreign intel agencies. And I think there was a time that you could have even called that theory about the honeypot operations the prevalent theory about Jeffrey Epstein. I no longer think that's the prevalent theory. I think the prevalent theory, the most likely plausible theory, is that Epstein worked off the books for intel, brokering deals. I mean, we know for a fact that Epstein was introduced to the intel world by Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr. Yes, former Attorney General Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr, who was not only a lifer at the CIA, he worked in the CIA before the CIA was the CIA. He worked in the OSS. Donald Barr hired Jeffrey Epstein as a math teacher before Epstein seemingly had any money. He just worked as a teacher. Teachers aren't paid enough to explain Jeffrey Epstein's enormous wealth just decades later. Donald Barr reportedly introduced Epstein to a lot of intel, the intel network that he was steeped in. And suddenly Epstein gets a lot of money. Where did he get that money? I don't know. That's one of the biggest outstanding questions that may or may not be explained by Epstein working off the books for intel. But the fundamental question is, why was Epstein let off the hook for these crimes? And the explanation that seems most likely is not that Epstein was running honeypot operations. Yeah, there were a lot of high-profile famous people that Epstein had photos with. He was obviously buddy with the richest and the most famous, not just in our country, but all around the world. From Bill Clinton here in the United States to Prince Andrew to Hollywood celebrities. He was very well connected and he wanted everyone to know about this. And so there's these allegations that he was running a blackmail operation, that he'd get these rich and powerful people onto his island. They'd commit crimes against children. Jeffrey Epstein would have photos and videos of these crimes, and he would hold it over the head of these whether it was government officials, whether it was rich and powerful celebrities, and that's why he was let off the hook. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. None of us know that that's true or not. What seems perhaps more likely is that Jeffrey Epstein was very rich and well-connected. How he got his money, we don't know. So maybe that's a big unanswered, that is a big unanswered question. Maybe the explanation is key here. But what seems more likely is that Jeffrey Epstein, birds of a feather flock together. And so he attracted other nasty characters from the rich and the powerful, and that they committed crimes together, that they engaged in debauchery together. Whether there's blackmail involved in that, I don't know. It's plausible. It's plausible that there was sort of unspoken blackmail and that that's how he got all of his clients, that once he engaged in such debauchery with these rich and powerful people, that they suddenly became his clients, maybe because of an unspoken threat that if you don't, I'll reveal this. That's plausible. But it seems more plausible that it wasn't a honeypot operation on behalf of Intel, and that Intel covered it up because he was an off-the-books liaison. That's the question that we need to know. And thanks to you, we are one step closer to getting an answer to that question. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, has announced that, again, thanks to you raising your voice. We've talked about it endlessly on this show. Sure, you can interview Ghislaine Maxwell. Sure, you can demand the Epstein files. But the real way, the best way, the most effective way to get the answer to the question of why was Jeffrey Epstein let off easily for committing the crimes the government knew he committed is to interview Alex Acosta, the man who let him off easily, the man who reportedly said, it was because I was told to back off because Epstein belonged to intelligence. We said, interview Alex Acosta, release the Alex Acosta Department of Justice OPR transcript, and you will be one step closer to actually answering the question. Well, thanks to you, Representative Comer, Chairman Comer, says that Alex Acosta is now coming in to testify. Take a listen.
Just give a quick update. I think everyone knows who all we've subpoenaed thus far. In the initial batch, we subpoenaed 6 former attorneys general, as well as Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. We've expanded that to Alex Acosta. Acosta's coming in, I believe, September the 19th, 16th or 19th. We've got that date down. I know that we'll have a lot of questions for him with respect to an earlier Epstein prosecution that he was involved in when he was U.S. attorney. We have the documents, the initial batch that had been sent by the White House. As you know, we also subpoenaed Pam Bondi for those documents. The White House is working with us. I want to publicly thank the White House for turning over so many documents thus far. We're in the process of uploading those documents for full transparency so everyone in America can see those documents. It's going to, as quick as we can get them uploaded, and as the speaker said, there are 34,000 pages. We're doing everything we can to get those uploaded. We want those to be public as soon as possible. And then we're going to continue to bring in more people. We learned of some additional names today. We're going to do everything we can to give the American public the transparency they seek, as well as provide accountability in memory of the victims who have already passed away, as well as those that were in the room and many others who haven't come forward. So we're sincere about this. This was a 2.5-hour discussion. It was as bipartisan as anything I've seen in the 9 years I've been here. Appreciate the speaker for giving us the authority to seek out everything that I think you all want and the people that I talk to as I travel America want. We're going to do everything we can to get the answers and to do it as soon as possible.
That's thanks to you. You did that. That is because you said, interview Alex Acosta. Where is Alex Acosta? We need Alex Acosta to testify. You said that. You called for the transcript to be released. You called for Alex Acosta to be dragged in front of Congress and answer your questions. The biggest takeaway from all of this, from the documents that the House Oversight Committee, the Epstein documents that were uploaded and made public, the biggest takeaway from the press conference of Epstein victims, the biggest takeaway is that your voice makes a difference. It makes a difference when you speak up. It makes a difference when you repost. It makes a difference when you share. It makes a difference when you politely and firmly demand justice. We are one step closer to answering that question. Why was Jeffrey Epstein let off easily for the gruesome crimes he committed against underage girls? Was it because the government allowed him to be let off easy, held him to a lower standard of justice than you would be held to? Because he had done work for them off the books, for our intelligence communities or for foreign intelligence communities. We are one step closer to getting the answer to that question thanks to you. You should be incredibly proud of yourselves. I am incredibly grateful for the work that we do together, making these things happen.